Recording. Thank you very much, disembodied voice. Okay. Does anyone know the German for déjà vu? Because Spielberg, Verstappen, Pole all sounds a little familiar. Welcome back to the Formula One Grid Talk podcast. Today we are looking at the big talking points from the Austrian Grand Prix qualifying session. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me today we have an invasion from the Everything F1 podcast with presenters Sean.
Hello there.
Hello, and Tom.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. Firstly, we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We do shout out all of you who leave 5 stars. So, Tom, back at the Red Bull Ring for the second consecutive weekend, and it was another dominant qualifying performance from Max Verstappen, and with his championship rival starting in P4, you'd expect another race win to follow tomorrow.
Yeah, it seems fairly open and shut already that Verstappen is probably going to sail off into the lead. I'd imagine with Perez overtaking Norris at some point and bringing home a Red Bull 1-2. In some ways, it would have been nice to have had Hamilton P2 or P3 perhaps, so we can have a bit of a closer battle at the front, a battle for the lead. But yeah, I think Verstappen will sew this one up pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sean, with his front row compatriot being Lando Norris, not quite the orange that the fans who were present at the Hungarian, Spielberg were cheering for, but, an orange nonetheless on the front row, his first ever time, what a fantastic lap from Lando Norris to put him on P2.
Absolutely incredible. Yeah, he started, I think he was only a couple of tenths off. It was a couple of thousandths off, 4,000, something like that, 400. Tiny margin. And even Lando himself said it was kind of just that final corner. Now Max obviously didn't exactly nail his second lap, but yeah, absolutely incredible from Lando. He's my star of the season so far, like by a country mile. He's the only one to score in every point, score points in every race. He's been phenomenal. I think everyone thought he might struggle with, big man Danny Ricciardo coming in, but no, Lando's taken that car and just ran with it. He's incredible at the moment and thoroughly deserved front row.
Yeah, and you would not have put money on there being a McLaren even that far up in qualifying today, given where they were this weekend, Tom.
No, I mean, we all know how good Norris is, and especially how good he has been this year. And that McLaren now with the Mercedes power unit in the back of it is quite something. Although it's funny how things, if they'd have stuck with Honda, who knows where they would have been this weekend. Well, maybe one step up, who knows? But Lando, I thought he had a good chance of breaking into the top 3 this weekend. And then to see him go P2 and be only, I think he was 0.048 off pole. Yeah, wow. It was he said in his post qualifying interview that he wanted to take this weekend up a step from last weekend, and he said he felt he'd taken up 2 steps. To me, it felt like he's leapt up a whole flight of proverbial steps, because to split the Red Bulls, who have a really good car, to be ahead of both Mercedes, one of them being a 7-time world champion, for someone who was 21 years old and only in his 3rd season of Formula One. Wow, well done, Lando.
Yeah, and according to Karan Chandok, it was actually the final corner with just a little bit more understeer than Max Verstappen that cost him pole position. And, imagine your first front row is also your first pole position. That would have just topped off this weekend for Lando Norris. But, the race isn't won on a Saturday, and, he may even surprise us tomorrow. Possibly not, but you can be optimistic. That's what this sport's about. So looking at P3, Sean, Sergio Perez finally sort of stepping up and being where his teammate needs him to be. P3, obviously, not discounting Lando Norris's fantastic performance, but it's a very good performance from Checo Perez in qualifying.
Yeah, it was. And he hadn't exactly been on the pace for Q1 and Q2, but yeah, he definitely stepped it up where the Mercedes faltered. Perez was there to pick up the, obviously Lando kind of surprised everyone. But, Perez's job for Red Bull is to be ahead of the Mercedes where possible, to be behind Max and ahead of the Mercedes. And he did that, and he nailed it. And he was only, 2.5 tenths off off Verstappen in the end, which is pretty good. I mean, like Verstappen obviously is in a class of one, and for Perez to be that close to him is easily closer than any teammates recently have been. So good performance. Hasn't had the cleanest of weekends, but yeah, he pulled it out of the bag when he needed to, and he's starting in a great position. And you know, if I was Mercedes, I'd be very worried now with Perez finally on song as well.
Yeah, something that Mercedes absolutely need. You know, having two teammates competing as close to a par as possible. But, you know, the first of those teammates, Tom, Lewis Hamilton, brand new contract with Mercedes, you know, leading him up until the 2023 season to the end, I believe.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
you'd hope that that would spring him on, but unfortunately, it's actually pushed him a little bit further back, and he's starting P4 tomorrow.
Yeah, with Mercedes this year, it just seems to be those elusive 2.5 tenths to Red Bull that they just cannot seem to find. And again, throughout qualifying, you know, whilst Hamilton did put it P2 on some occasions, by the time Max had done another run or Checo being out, or in this case, Norris had done a run, he just couldn't. Hamilton, for all his talents and all his qualities, he just could not get. He couldn't just get there. Basically, there's no other way of putting it. And yeah, he was. I think it was his second run in Q3, or it may have been Q2. I can't remember offhand, but he wasn't even setting green sectors, let alone purple sectors. He just. I mean, I know Verstappen didn't have a particularly good final up in Q3 either, but yeah, that Hamilton just forever in his shadow this weekend so far.
Yeah, not many drivers setting green sector times in the end of Q3, but, you know, fortunately for Mercedes, the only person to do it ahead of them was Sergio Perez, but that's also not unfortunate. So, yeah. Sean, P5, Valtteri Bottas, behind Lewis Hamilton, which is where you expect to see Valtteri Bottas, but, you know, again, not picking up the pieces when Lewis Hamilton couldn't deliver is the narrative that will be taken away from this weekend if this is how it stays.
Absolutely. And obviously with Hamilton signing that new contract, you know, obviously all the kind of attention turns to Bottas now. And in fairness to him, yes, he was only fractionally slower than Hamilton. And actually both Mercedes were only themselves fractionally quicker than they were last week, even the step softer tires this week. Really not a good weekend for Mercedes at all. But Bottas, yeah, fifth, you know, neither of them did very well. Bottas's one saving grace is that, you know, it wasn't a big gap at the very least. But yeah, obviously, like, tons of pressure on him now. Like, is George Russell going to get that seat for Silverstone? That's the rumor flying around. I don't think so. But will Bottas be kept for next year? You know, when he's performing like this, you still can't get ahead of Hamilton when it really counts. And you wouldn't put it past him you wouldn't like bet on him to get past him in the race either. So, you know, Bottas' work cut out for him this week big time, even more so than Lewis. Not a great day for Mercedes in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tom, let's move on to best of the rest, sort of. Pierre Gasly P6. He's always just about here. This is possibly his like average qualifying position at this point, because he does seem to do really well on a Saturday, and that's something he's continued to do again. And as long as he can, you know, stay in the fight for the, you know, this part of the points positions tomorrow, you know, and not end up spinning around and facing the wrong way at turn 3, Pierre Gasly could be quite the outsider's point for, you know, picking up maybe P5 if someone ahead drops back.
Yeah, I think Crofty said on the Sky F1 coverage that this is the third race in a row that Pierre Gasly. I'm just looking at the qualifying sheets on the screen. This is the third race in a row that Gasly has qualified P6, which is absolute, as you said, it's best of the rest. I mean, McLaren are the only other team really in the midfield, if you like, but they're at the upper echelons of the midfield. So for Gasly, yeah, P6, great result in qualifying. And, you know, if you can keep his nose clean, yes, it wasn't entirely his fault to begin with last week. But if he can keep his nose clean and then, you know, if there's perhaps an accident ahead or a mechanical retirement or something, he's on for a good haul of points tomorrow.
Yeah, he will be. And what will be exciting AlphaTauri even more, Sean, is that Yuki Tsunoda is right there with him. You know, he impressed very much in pre-season testing and at the first race in Bahrain, but now that he's right behind Pierre Gasly, starting P7 tomorrow, this is exactly what AlphaTauri need from Yuki Tsunoda.
100% it is. And I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, it's very close in the standings. Obviously McLaren are a bit ahead, but AlphaTauri can catch Ferrari if they keep performing like this, for sure. And Tsunoda, he was 8th last week, 7th this week. He's improving, and I think after that catch in practice, I think even Karun Chandok said on the Sky coverage that he needs to maybe just cool down a little bit, just a 1% cool down. He's obviously caused a few red flags in qualifying, but take off that 1% and you'll get a good result. And he nailed it for the second week in a row. So great result for Tsunoda. I rate him very highly. I loved watching him in Formula 2 last year. I thought he was very exciting. Was delighted he got the seat. And now to see him right thereabouts with Gasly, it's brilliant, especially how far ahead of the Ferraris both of them are. Really good result for AlphaTauri.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with Ferraris not even being in Q3. So, currently in Q3, most likely, absolutely 100% getting a penalty on his birthday. Sebastian Vettel starting P8 currently, touch wood. I'm still waiting on a steward's announcement coming through at some point during this podcast. So everything from now has an asterisk. But basically, Tom, Sebastian Vettel, P8, held up Fernando Alonso at the end of Q2.
Oh,
yeah. What can you say?
From a 4-time world champion who's been on the grid since 2007, you'd expect better. I mean, we had the director from race director Michael Massey this weekend saying from turn 9 and turn 10 onwards, you don't hold back. You open the throttle and you start the lap, because Austria is the shortest qualifying lap on the calendar this year. And it's just, and what was Vettel doing at turn 10 going into turn 11? He was going slowly. Alonso was on an absolute flyer behind him, would have almost certainly put it in Q3. And then Vettel just completely cuts across him, just doesn't look. I do think in Vettel's defense, his race engineer should have said, Alonso on a hot lap behind, be careful, let him go past, watch it. He should have told him, not too dissimilar from the Williams and Latifi thing in Baku from last month. It's that kind of thing again. I think some of that has to be on the race engineer. But yeah, like you said, Ruby, he's currently P8. If Tsunoda gets the 3-place grid penalty for the block he did on Bottas last weekend, if this isn't minimum a 3-place grid penalty, something is seriously wrong. And yeah, he must be dropping down to at least P11. I wouldn't be surprised if they give a 5-place grid penalty just because of how dangerous it was. And Alonso was rightfully incredibly annoyed, as I'm sure anybody would have been in that position.
I think the thing that, just capped it off as well was Sebastian Vettel didn't even make it to do a final lap in Q3.
No,
in
he
Q2.
didn't, no.
He didn't make it to the line. And it does show, one, why, slowing down so much in the final sector for that last run can hamper you. But at the same time, like you've said, someone should have told him that Alonso is coming on really quickly behind him. And with every single driver being told, you do not go slowly through turns 9 and 10. You should be going, if not flat out, at least fast.
Yeah, and not crawling around like that, because we heard at the start of qualifying the FIA team, FIA radio with Mercedes, and Michael Massey explicitly said from turn 9 onwards you go, and Vettel didn't.
He did not.
Naughty boy, and on his birthday.
Yeah, we did see several drivers going slowly during those final 2 corners, so it will be interesting to see just if the FIA does at least maybe have a look at some other drivers. But at the end of the day, that was one of the most clear-cut examples of a block happening. So, sorry, Seb, it might be your birthday, but you're not getting that special treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sean, George Russell in P9 on mediums.
Wow.
It's all going right for him at the minute, and touch wood, he can actually have some momentum going with this, because last time out he was running comfortably in P8, and then obviously he had mechanical issues. George Russell, is he going to get his first points in a Williams tomorrow? Give me your assessment.
I want nothing else to happen out of tomorrow's race other than to see George Russell finish in the top 10. And I mean, that lap on the mediums was so good. His lap on the softs in Q3 was slower. That's how perfectly he nailed Q2. Like, what a performance. Mr. Saturday, 100%. I'm pretty sure that's 100% now for the whole season into Q2. First time into Q3. Williams' first time into Q3 since 2018, I think.
Since Monza 2018, I think.
Monza 2018, like, that is a very, very long time, and what a performance. And like, not only that, he stormed ahead of his teammate, like the biggest gap to the TV all season. Really great performance. Beat Stroll, beat both Ferraris, beat Ricciardo. Probably wouldn't have beat Alonso had he got that lap in. Alonso reckons he'd have been 5th or 6th, and I believe him. He's been good all weekend, but even still, even if Alonso had nailed it, Russell still would have got through in 10th. Like, he was brilliant. So fair play to him. Like, what a performance. Delighted for him. And Toto Wolff must be kicking himself now, wondering what is he going to do with this kid, because he can't let him sit in a Williams for another season. He just can't. He just can't. And if I was George Russell, I'd be saying, Toto, look at this. Like, give me the seat, or I'll go somewhere else, because anyone would have him. Like, he's something else. He's a very special talent.
He did say in a pre-qualifying feature that next season he will be powered by a Mercedes, which, narrows it down to 3 teams.
3 teams.
3 teams.
There's a driver coming a bit later in this where you think, "Ooh, is there an R to replace an R?" That's a rumor that I kind of like the sounds of. We get there.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so no, I hadn't even. Sorry if I'm interjecting, but I hadn't even thought of that. That would be very Red Bull of them, shall we say?
Yes, it would be.
I think I've just realised who you're talking about as well.
Yeah, it took me a moment there, because I thought, is there an R in Valtteri Bottas? And I just thought
there is, but no. Cool. So Lance Stroll in P10. I should mention every single driver in the top 10 finished within a second of each other. But Tom, Lance Stroll, P10, he'll at least be grateful, to have made it through to Q3, given, that Aston Martin has either been, either or, but, they just need a good performance, Aston Martin.
Yeah, Aston Martin's been a funny one this year, because when they started the season, Vettel was all over the shop, and it was only sort of Monaco that he actually had a solid weekend. And Aston Martin as a team, they just seem to yo-yo this year. I spoke about this on the Everything F1 podcast, maybe last week or the week before. Aston Martin, obviously, they were Racing Point in their previous iteration last year, but they are obviously the same team. And they have some significant ties with Mercedes, shall we say. Especially if you look at last year's car, for example. But they've definitely been affected pretty much as the Mercedes factory team has by this directive, or sort of like technical regulation this year, affecting the low rake at the back of the car. And yeah, they just don't seem to have as much of a handle on it this year. So for Stroll this weekend, got into Q3. Yes, okay, he was last in Q3, lost out to George Russell, but Russell is Russell. But Stroll is still a decent driver, and he still did well to get that car into Q3. For him, I think it'll just be a case of just trying to hold it in the points, whether it is P10 or if he sneaks a P9 or something. Obviously, he's got the 2 charging Ferraris behind him who are going to be baying for blood and have free tyre selection. For Stroll tomorrow, I think just holding the point is sort of critical, especially if Aston want to try and secure 4th in the constructors. Or secure 5th even, because I don't think they're going to catch Ferrari.
Yeah, and especially when you consider his teammate, Sebastian Vettel, who's obviously new to the team, has been very much creeping up on his, consistent-ish points, like scoring, and now all of a sudden Sebastian Vettel's ahead of him after just a couple of results, That, for starters, as much as Lance Stroll must feel so confident in a team that's owned by his dad, that must at least shake his confidence a little bit, in the sense that, he should know this team. He's been there several years. He should be familiar with the car. It's the same as last year.
Well, yeah, he's been there since what 2 seasons at Williams, and he joined in 2019, which as soon as we heard that Lawrence Stroll led that consortium, but in the middle of 2018, we always knew that Stroll was going to have that seat, and why wouldn't he? I feel like we should expect a bit more from Stroll because he did have a good junior career. Yes, he was very young into F1, but he should be effectively leading that team because Vettel is the new driver in that team. But it would be nice to see him do more, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sean, moving out of the top 10 now, currently, we should mention. Carlos Sainz, P11 in the Ferrari. They went on the mediums in Q2. Clearly, that wasn't the right decision, given that they didn't make it through to Q3. So, they've used a set of mediums, like in qualifying conditions as well. That does take a little bit more out of the tire than just a random, lap. But at the end of the day, starting outside the top 10, free choice of tires, which will certainly help. And the Ferraris did show last weekend that you can overtake around this circuit. They won't necessarily be, too disappointed, but they are Ferrari. They expect to be much higher up. And with Lando Norris starting in P2, that's a lot of points that they could lose to their closest championship battle.
It is, and there's kind of a lot to unpick in Ferrari because they did they go on the mediums to try and engineer a P11? Maybe not. That's a very hard thing to just really do. Like, are they that good? It's very Ferrari to kind of continue to force through the mediums even when they know they're not going to make it through on them. And it's not the first time we've seen them do this. But starting on the mediums is obviously preferable, especially a fresh set. They'd probably be pretty confident that they can pass Stroll and Vettel, maybe Russell. I hope not, maybe. But, not a great day for Ferrari. It's not a track that suits them by any means. But yeah, with Norris so far in front, they'll be thankful that Ricciardo is behind them both, at least that. So if they can keep him out of the points, damage limitation, I suppose that's what this whole weekend is for them. And with what is surely to be a penalty for Vettel coming, Sainz will likely start in the top 10 on a fresh set of tires. So not the end of the world. And, from Sainz's personal point of view, he's out-qualified Leclerc again. And once again, everyone thought he'd go there and be the whipping boy to Leclerc, and he really hasn't. And I have my Chile t-shirt on today from his McLaren days. And, I like Ferrari this year. I like the lineup. I think they have a very, very strong lineup, the two of them. The car is a bit better. Well, no, it's considerably better than last year. But Sainz, obviously 11th isn't great, but he's still performing relatively well. He's outperforming or matching Leclerc, which is exactly what Ferrari want him to do. It's what a lot of people expected he wouldn't be able to do. So, looking at the bright side, he's ahead of his, teammate who many think is the pretender to Max Verstappen's potential throne. So, not the worst, but with Lando Norris in second, Ferrari need to do better this. I don't think they're going to catch them for third.
No.
And AlphaTauri are ahead of them both. So they need to catch AlphaTauri or they're going to lose a huge chunk of points to them as well. Austria is not a great track for them. They'll hope for better in future and hope they can get a few points out of it at least. Like you said, they showed last week you can overtake, and Leclerc especially was very good at it, and he was driver of the day last week. So they'll be confident enough going into the race, but bad qualifying for them.
Yeah, and touching on that, Tom, obviously Sean mentioned Charles Leclerc is behind Carlos Sainz. He's in P12, literally less than half a tenth in it. Yeah, less than half a tenth in it in terms of Q2 times. That it's sort of reminiscent of where they were, not this time last year, that's for sure, but towards the end of the season last year.
Much like Sean said, Ferrari they've got a difficult race ahead of them. I think they are fortunate that they, like we said, with them not being into Q2, they do get the free tire choice. And especially with the tires this weekend being a step softer than they were last weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some teams go for a medium then hard strategy and try and run a one stop, then perhaps strap on a set of softs at the end. I think there is going to be a bit of variation in it this week. Yeah, just looking at the times here, Sainz in Q2 a 104.559, then Leclerc a 104.6 dead. And I've been really impressed with Sainz. Even when he was at Renault, it was the first time we ever sort of got to hear about him. And then, he was very, very good at McLaren. And then, got the elusive podium in Brazil in that chaotic race in 2019. And now he's been ahead of Leclerc in several qualifyings, qualified and finished ahead of him last weekend. He is, there's a good chance he'll get bumped up to P10, obviously, with Vettel probably plummeting at least 3 places. So, he could be on for a couple of points this weekend. It'll also be interesting to see if Ferrari put any team orders in play, because if Leclerc is sort of like sniffing Charles Leclerc, he's that close on the track, then he will. Do you think we would see them say let Golden Boy past? Who knows?
It is something that happened in Carlos Sainz's first season, back in Singapore. Max is faster than you, but he'll let you pass if he doesn't, and then he didn't let him pass. So, it's certainly something that Carlos Sainz might have learned from in the past. But at the end of the day, he knows what to expect by joining Ferrari, who have always made it very clear, that
who their number one is.
Yeah, like there are very few occasions going back where Ferrari haven't had a number one. Yeah. And even starting a season without a number one, such as, potentially last season, it doesn't last very long, as we see,
And I think it's fair to say a natural order. We saw it last year. A natural, hierarchy, if you like, takes place very quickly, or takes shape, I should say.
Especially in Ferrari.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's Ferrari and a natural order are just,
And Ferrari team orders, Spielberg, do we need to mention 2002?
They do have history there.
Yes, just a little bit, yes.
Just a little
That's
bit.
That's that for the final point, will it be?
Yeah, God, yeah.
So, Sean, P13, Daniel Ricciardo. It's certainly not the week to be having your birthday if you're an F1 driver, because, Daniel Ricciardo has just consistently, since moving to McLaren, not had, the same level of pace as Lando Norris. And we have seen, drivers moving to new teams and taking a while to adjust. It took Vettel several races. It took Carlos Sainz 5 minutes. But at the same time, Daniel Ricciardo, we have seen, is a very good driver. Where's it gone?
I haven't a clue. And I'll preface this, what I'm about to say, with saying I'm a McLaren fan, lifelong McLaren fan. And when Ricciardo announced about this time last year that he was moving to McLaren, I screamed for joy. I couldn't have been happier. What a way to replace someone as good as Sainz. But I can't explain it. And, Lando, it's not that Perez is a little bit behind Verstappen, as you'd expect. There's pace in the Red Bull, and Perez is a little bit behind him because he's that good. And Perez hasn't always been the best qualifier. He's a better racer. Daniel Ricciardo is a bloody good qualifier and always has been. He was out qualifying Verstappen back in the day. He out qualified Vettel all the time. I think he beat Vettel 14 out of 19 in their first season together in qualifying. So
it was something ridiculous.
It's incredible. And the reigning 4-time world champion. So Ricciardo is a qualifier for sure. And there is an insane amount of pace in that McLaren, as Lando showed, and it's just not working for him. He can maybe take a tiny bit of heart from the fact that last weekend he did have pace in the race, much more pace in the race, and would have comfortably finished in the points had the car kept working. He could probably push for points, maybe, if he can get a good start like he did last week, and get past those Ferraris early, because that's if he gets past the two of them early, it's game on for points. If he doesn't, he's going to struggle. And he is the R I was talking about of Zach Brown on the pit wall the last 2 weekends. His head has been moving so much. He's so unimpressed. He's shaking his head left and right. Where his young gun is up top. His experienced man that he spent a not very small fortune on is languishing in Nowheresville. And you know, if I was Zach Brown, I love Danny Ricciardo, but if I was Zach Brown, I'd be finding out what George Russell's phone number is. Because if Toto's not going to give him a drive and Russell thinks he's going to be empowered by Mercedes, why would he go to Aston Martin? He won't. There's no way Lance Stroll is leaving his daddy's. It's not happening. So and he's not staying in Williams. He's just not. He'd be better to leave Formula One than stay in Williams. He could go to McLaren. It's possible unless Ricciardo hugely improves his game, but I don't see many tracks coming in the next couple of weeks that'll make life any easier for him.
Yeah, it's going to be a team that begins with M. I think we can guarantee that.
Yes.
If he does join another team.
Yes, it's definitely going to begin with M. It just depends what letter comes next.
Yeah.
Yes, but even like in Q2, he was 3-4 tenths off Lando. So actually not that far, but it's such a massive gap. Like it was such a tight qualifying. Like you said, the top 10 split by only a second. It's so tight and it's really tiny margins that he's just not finding for whatever reason. And we heard, Lewis Hamilton was in the simulator all weekend. Maybe Danny needs to spend just a bit more time back at the factory, working on whatever it is he's struggling with. It's just not working for him at the moment. And it's heartbreaking to see because I love Danny. I love McLaren. And those orange cars should not be in 13th. They just shouldn't. Not this year.
No, it's certainly not the season that they, reestablish their connection with either Honda or Renault. So yeah, they should absolutely, Danny Ricciardo does need to find some pace, and absolutely. It might happen tomorrow in the race. You never know.
Fingers crossed for him. I hope so.
Yeah. So Tom, Fernando Alonso, P14, very much probably shouldn't have been. We've established this already, but he was flying. He was absolutely flying, and he will be so angry to have missed out on Q3. Given, he's been delivering results for Alpine all for the last couple of races.
Yeah, I don't know if Alonso has been having some of Bottas's special porridge or what, but yeah, he has just been sensational this weekend. I'm sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in Q1 he went third at one point, or
he went second, I think.
Second, thank you. Yeah, even better. Yeah, and because I remember at one time it was like Verstappen, Alonso, Norris. I think those were the top three at one point in Q1, and yeah, he's. I thought Alonso had a bit of a sort of quiet start to his F1 return, which you'd expect because he hadn't been in a Formula One kind of race environment for a couple of years. And obviously he did the young driver test. We take the young with a pinch of salt, given he's almost 40. But I think ever since Baku, because he had a decent result in Baku, and then in France he was okay. The car went backwards a bit, but he still held on to some points and clawed it back for about 8th or something, or maybe 9th or so. He was around there. And then last week had a very, very good qualifying, came, I think, P7 perhaps. Again, I can't remember offhand. And then this weekend should have easily been into Q3 if it wasn't for Vettel basically cutting him off. So yeah, so he's going to be a man on a mission tomorrow to work his way back up, to certainly try and get near the points and back to where that Alpine should be, because there are, looking at the thing here, there are 2 teams on the calendar this year, or on track rather this weekend, where they've got one driver who is sort of like really good in P3 or Q3, or Alonso should have been Q3, and then another driver very much languishing down the bottom of the order. And we've already spoken about the one of those teams. So yeah, Alonso you'd expect to see him put in some serious moves tomorrow. Whether that Renault power unit in the back is going to hold him back a bit, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, and what he will certainly have is, some medium tyres to give him some form of, long strategy options, given he didn't make it through to Q3 and he was out on the softs. So, yeah. Sean, Antonio Giovinazzi, P15, made it into Q2, which is, the least that, well, I say least. Alfa Romeo will be excited to at least, have drivers in Q2, given they've lost so much pace compared to where they were a couple of years ago. But, he's beating his teammate very much at the end of his career, Kimi Räikkönen. But is there anything more that you think Antonio Giovinazzi needs to be doing to potentially be in that team next season? Or do you think, as long as he's outshining Kimi, he's doing a good enough job?
I would actually rate Antonio as kind of my star of the back markers in Austria, because he qualified 15th last week as well. Finished 15th, but he still finished ahead of Kimi. And again, outqualified Kimi, got into Q2. Obviously they're in a pretty tight. They're ahead of them. They're up 2 points ahead of Williams, but with George Russell doing so well, they are in a tight battle with Williams. And they need to hope that Russell will continue his bad luck, which touch wood, he won't. But no, I think Antonio's doing quite a good job. Obviously, Ferrari have a wealth of talent, and how personally I can't grasp how Callum Ilott does not have a drive this season. And that's a matter for the Haas discussion, I think. And obviously he's had some tests in the Alpha, but I think Antonio's doing a good job, and I think I think he's doing enough to kind of keep his seat for next year, unless Alpha want to go, kind of new year, new regs, new opportunity, and go with some youth and freshness. But I think Antonio's doing what he needs to do. I don't think he's really putting a foot wrong. Obviously, that car is poor, to put it politely. They've done well to score 2 points so far this season, but he outqualified Raikkonen, and as an F1 driver, your first goal is to beat your teammate, and he's done that, and his teammate is a world champion. So, I don't think Alpha could ask much more of Antonio this weekend.
Yeah, for certainly for a driver who wrecked 2 Sauber cars in 2 depth positions, to be qualifying and then doing relatively well in a race setting, that's what he needs to be doing. So, Tom, moving on to Antonio's teammate Kimi Räikkönen out in Q1. He's very famously said that this is just a hobby for him, but I don't understand how someone with the accolades that Kimi Räikkönen has got, how could you settle for driving around in P16?
I don't have an answer to that. You've asked a question which is a conversation I've definitely had with other fellow F1 nerds and enthusiasts. Granted, when Kimi joined Sauber in 2019, or Alpha Sauber, whatever they were called then, when they joined that team, they were a good team because they still had the somewhat questionable Ferrari power unit in the back of it. Then obviously ever since that was found out towards the end of 2019, they've just gone backwards, unfortunately, much as what has happened to Haas. But in terms of like, it's like there was that famous bit of him from Drive to Survive. It was about the only thing he said in the entire series, where he was sitting there and like you said, Ruby, he said, "Oh, it's just more of a hobby for me." Kimi, infamously a man of few words anyway, and it's just, yeah. I granted he brings a lot of experience, obviously, and he's been there, he's done it at the top teams, and he's done it in. He was doing it in 2004 for McLaren, and he's been with Ferrari, with McLaren, and he was with Lotus when they were up there, and yeah, it's just, I wonder how much longer he's actually going to do it, and also how much longer Alpha are actually going to want to pay him to sort of effectively trundle around when they could get, as Sean mentioned, the likes of a Callum Ilott, a Robert Schwartzman in that car, because whilst Giovinazzi is a young driver, and sorry to go back to the previous driver, but I promise this does tie in. Giovinazzi is the same age as me. In fact, I think he might be a year older. I'm 26. And Giovinazzi first drove in F1 in 2017 when he stepped in for Pascal Wehrlein after he had a neck injury at the Race of Champions. And then he was test and development driver for Ferrari, and has obviously then been full-time since 2019. And Giovinazzi has come a long way. And I think if they bring on a Schwartzman or an Ilott, I think Ilott is probably the name that people are talking about for a Ferrari-powered seat. having Ilott in place of Raikkonen from next year alongside Giovinazzi would possibly be a good move. So it's something Ferrari would probably like to see, because they can develop one of their next young guns, and Kimi will probably just take a paycheck and go and live in the woods in Finland or something.
What would
I
also
agree,
help
and
is
if I was Alpha, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be putting Callum Ilott in that car over Kimi rather than Giovinazzi.
Yeah, I was surprised.
As much as I
to
love
see
Kimi, as much as I love Kimi,
I love Kimi as well, especially when he was asked about missing the presentation by Pele in Malaysia that one year. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to say.
Yes, I do.
Yes, but and then obviously him having an ice cream in Malaysia, but
crashing in Monaco and strolling straight to his yacht.
Yeah, I mean, if that isn't goals, I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's just if I was Alfa Romeo, I'd be looking to get one of the youngsters in, perhaps breathe a bit of fresh air into the team.
You're also a lot more likely to learn something in an Alfa Romeo than you are in another Ferrari powered car, which we will get to later on, to no one's enjoyment. But yeah, so Sean, Esteban Ocon in P17, since he signs that contract extension with Alpine, Esteban Ocon has, left the stadium. He's not showed up at all. Where's Esteban Ocon gone? Badum-tish.
Do you want a slow clap for that?
I know, yeah.
I'll take a slow clap.
I think we need to invest in a soundboard for that, because that was. I think that deserves something.
Thank you, Tom.
I don't have an answer for your clever pun. You keep giving me all these ones that I've no answer to where their pace has gone. Now I rate Esteban Ocon. I think he's a good driver, and anybody going up against Fernando Alonso is going to struggle. Even though, as Tom said, Alonso did have a slow enough start, and Esteban had a pretty decent start to the season. I can't answer that. It doesn't make any sense. Alonso showed, obviously he's only a couple of places ahead of him, but what was it, Q1? I think he said he was. I have it written here. He was only 2/10 off pole in Q1, off first in Q1, and even at that, he complained about being blocked by Tsunoda, so he would have been quicker. So that Alpine does have pace in it, and Alonso is repeatedly complimentary about how it feels. He's saying that it feels good, it feels balanced, it feels quick. It's obviously not as quick as they'd like it to be, but it feels good. And Ocon just doesn't seem to have that same kind of feeling with it anymore. And in Q1 he was half a second behind Alonso. That's a big gap on such a short track. That's a big gap. That's the equivalent of over a second on a long track. It's poor, and he did. I think he managed to get up into P13 or something like that with his final run, and it still wasn't good enough. He just got knocked out by everyone that came after him. That's a tough one. He's the, I suppose there's always one, and he's the shock of qualifying this weekend. But even last weekend he qualified 17th as well, was it? So he doesn't like this track at all. I don't know what to say. Hopefully he can have a bit of a strong race. That Alpine is okay. I'd say it's about on par with the Aston, which I don't think is a great car this year anyway. But Alpine are not having a great year. And Ocon's not helping that. And he's slipped behind Alonso in the standings as well. I can't see him scoring points tomorrow with the cars ahead of him.
Yeah, Chandok did say that Ocon missed the apex at turn 3 by a country mile. So that's where all of his pace went. He just did not have a very confident lap whatsoever when it needed to count. And that's when you need to be delivering, the best lap of your career so far. Yeah.
And again, I think he's a good driver. I think he deserves the extended contract for sure. And obviously, French driver, French team, French engine. It's a match made in heaven for Alpine and Renault. But yeah, I hope to see more from him in the race. Maybe he can have a good race. But I hope to see more from the next couple of weeks for sure to kind of prove, because like you said, since that contract, and it's common in Formula One, someone signs a new contract and they plummet. Maybe Lewis Hamilton, prime examples, announced today and he's only 4th. But yeah, maybe you can get ahead of Raikkonen and Giovinazzi.
That will certainly be, a minimum that Ocon's hoping for on the start-finish straight of the race. But yeah, Tom, Nicholas Latifi, P18, obviously miles behind his teammate in relative terms, given, one's in Q3 for the first time in a Williams, and the other one is just ahead of two cars that, you don't expect to actually finish a lap round any circuit. So, he's going to be annoyed that he's missed out, given that he had that opportunity to develop on, last weekend's, race and qualifying experience, which is why a lot of the drivers seem to have, settled in. But Latifi's still, best of a bad bunch.
Yeah, Latifi's a funny one because he's a likable character, and obviously his father brings some significant financial backing to the team. To be fair to Latifi, just looking at it, he did a 105.195 in Q1, and Russell did a 104.907. So he was only just under 3/10 off Russell, which I think round a different circuit we'd be seeing a very different qualifying. But round the Red Bull Ring, which is one of the shortest, I think the only circuit which is shorter than it is Monaco, perhaps, in terms of distance. Yeah,
Monaco's shorter distance, but Austria's shorter lap time.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Latifi. I mean, he beat the Haas. He beat both Haas. Well done. Yeah,
well done. Is that a well done? That's if
that's that. For Latifi, coming 18th is like getting a medal for showing up. That's like in my GCSEs when they used to give you a point for writing your name properly at the top. It's like, yeah. I mean, I don't really know what to say. He had a good weekend last weekend. He put in that one absolute storm of a lap at the start of Q1, which I think put the wind up, the proverbial, for a lot of people. Because he went up to about P7. I think people went, "Oh, hang on a minute." Yeah, I mean P18, just behind Ocon. Not really much more to say.
Yeah, you do often reach the point when we're getting to this part of the grid where it's like, what can I actually say about this driver? And unfortunately for Nicholas Latifi, he is very often one of those of what more can I say?
Yeah.
But a driver that we have been impressed by this season so far, given what he's got to work with, Sean, Mick Schumacher in P19, half a second ahead of his teammate. Considering how close the field has been this weekend, and considering they're in matching technology, definitely not matching talent, but matching technology. That's a good, and what we'd expect to see from Mick Schumacher.
Absolutely. And again, Schumacher's another one that I adored watching in Formula 2 last season. Self Sonoda, Callum Ilott. And obviously reigning F2 champion. I don't think anybody is too surprised that he's constantly beating Mazepin. But at the same time, Mazepin did win 4 races last season, and Mick only won 3, as far as I remember. So explain that one, because I can't. But again, as we kind of mentioned with Giovinazzi, the first goal for Formula 1 drivers, any racing driver, is to beat your teammate. And in a car that's not being developed, that their own kind of team and engineers are saying is a piece of junk. I think someone explained it like, well, you can't. They can't really do too much wrong, because they can only ever qualify 19th and 20th. And Schumacher, if he beats Mazepin every weekend, then he's doing his job, and he will hope that the higher ups, Binotto and all, and Ferrari, are at least paying attention to how much he's beating Mazepin by. That's the impressive thing. I think, after a lap or two, less than 2 laps last week in the race, he was already close to 2 seconds ahead of Mazepin, despite 18 cars of traffic in front of him. So it's very confusing. It's embarrassing for a big name like Haas, especially like for Americans. Like a big name like Haas, Gene Haas and Haas Racing are a big name, and they have had a good history in Formula 1. They came in and blitzed the field and surprised everyone. And this season, with their not a Russian flag livery, and their controversial second driver, I feel for Mick. He's doing what he needs to do. and he is doing more, I would say, than what he needs to do. And, you know, unfortunately, I think he's going to be in that team for a while, though. I can't see signs being dropped anytime soon. Maybe he'll get a jump up to Alpha, and himself and Ilot can form a super team in Alpha next season, but that's a stretch as well, because Giovinazzi doesn't necessarily deserve to be dumped. It's tough for Mick. He's doing what he needs to do. He beat Mazepin by a big margin.
Yeah.
You can have the fun of talking about Mazepin, Tom.
Yeah, it's all no one wants to be the last, given who it almost always is. But yeah, P20, Nikita Mazepin. We're used to saying this, apart from when someone just doesn't actually start in qualifying, which I think is the only occasion as to where he hasn't been starting P20, well, hasn't qualified P20, I should say. Yeah, like basically the opposite of what I said to Sean. He's half a second off his teammate. He's, you know, driving in possibly one of the worst F1 cars we've seen since, you know,
we're talking HRT. Yeah.
No,
and it's
even Daniel Ricciardo managed to do some stuff in HRT. Yes. He can't even race under his own nationality flag.
No, I know. No, that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
No. Oh, Mazepin. Yes. Well, got to be careful what I say in case I see like a red dot from the Kremlin coming through the window as well. But
he at least didn't spin.
Yes,
there's something positive.
Well
now
done.
You can say everything else.
Well done, Nikita. You didn't spin the car. Aren't you proud? I need to be really careful. I mean, the Haas.
You really don't on this podcast.
It's not the podcast. It's Putin listening that I'm more concerned about. No. It's Mazepin. I mean, yes, okay. The Haas is an absolute trailer of a car this year. He'd probably be quicker driving one of the tracks, so they bring the stuff in the races to at this rate. But so I mean, Haas the only teams who didn't manage to get into the 105s as well this weekend, interestingly. Although Schumacher wasn't far off. Mazepin, I don't really know what to say. He finished 20th where you'd expect. He just went about it this weekend, which is what you'd expect from someone down this end of the grid. He's not going to be, as much as people might not like him, he's not going anywhere because his father is significantly financing the team, and a finance agreement like that will come with stipulations that his son has a seat. He's not the worst driver in the world, as some people would like people to believe. If he was really that bad, he would not have a super license. And if he continued to be that bad, his super license would be revoked. We need to look at somebody like Yuji Eid, for example, who was that bad, the FIA revoked his super license because he was such a liability. Mazepin has actually got better as the season has gone on. Yes, he had some rather high-profile spins at the start of the season, and obviously his previous off-track antics leave a lot to be desired. But moving away from his sort of, because let's be fair, unless there is like a shift in the atmosphere, he's not going to finish in the points as much as he'd like to. That half of the grid, they're just not really going to get there. He'll probably be lapped 4 times and then call it a day. But ultimately, he's driving around in a race car. But his did either of you see the present he got for Gunther Steiner after Steiner got in the spinning top?
Wasn't it a door?
Yes, making reference to K-Mag from a couple of years ago. Yeah, so
I mean, it means Nikita watches Drive to Survive. So that's endearing.
Yeah, but I also wonder if somebody, it's like the PR team at Haas, have said, "Look, Nikita, you're a bit of a dick, and you need people to like you. So here's an idea." And then I actually really liked the interview he did with Crofty. I actually thought he came across pretty well. So maybe he's had some PR training. Who knows? But yeah,
I mean, again, he did finish 5th in the F2 championship last season, and of And of the top 5, 3 of them are in Formula One.
Formula
Mick
One.
Schumacher, Yuki Tsunoda, Nikita Mazepin.
Mazepin.
Arguably, the 2 who missed out, Eilert and Schwartzman, deserved it more than him. But he could drive his car. Like you said, he has a super license, but when he's half a second off his teammate in the same car, that's just not good enough repeatedly. And finishing, I'd nearly put money that at some point this season, Mick Schumacher will lap Nikita Mazepin.
I think if the Haas wasn't as bad a car as it is, I could see that happening. But because the Haas is such garbage this year, I just don't think it's gonna. I don't think that will happen. Maybe if we race a Bahrain outer, perhaps, but that'll probably turn into wacky races.
Fun. Yeah,
because it's something which I talked about on the Everything F1 podcast a few weeks ago. I think it was after Baku. Mazepin. I'm trying not to be completely negative because there's a lot of negativity about him, and sometimes that's perhaps not. Sometimes we need to look at the bigger picture. But some of his on-track antics, his questionable moves, his rather aggressive defending styles, we really need to look at F2. I think it was Bahrain. Was it all Bahrain. In the same? Was it all in the same race as well, Sean?
Yeah. It was the second Bahrain race, and he was just weaving all over the place.
He reminded me of that sketch in Mr. Bean where Mr. Bean is pulling the strings to drive his Mini. I remember
saying to my girlfriend at that race, if he does this, because he'd already been announced, I said, if he does this in F1 next year, he'll kill someone.
And I agree with you there. And the way he moved across the start-finish straight in Baku, if
on his own teammate.
On his own teammate, yeah. There wouldn't have been that solid wall there. We could have been having a very, very different conversation. Again, like Latif, I don't really know what to add. Mazepin, you do you, bro. And it's just like, just trundle around and take the paycheck.
Try not to spin.
Yeah.
Very much. I think a finished race is, it's the least we can expect from Mazepin, any on-track antics aside, But yeah, let's have a look at let's give out our star of qualifying. So there's 2 options for me, like who I would go for, but mostly I want to hear from you guys first. So Sean, your star of qualifying, please.
I am going to give mine to George Russell. Even as a McLaren fan, George Russell for me, he's just gotten better and better and better and better. He's been knocking on the door of Q3. He was 11th last week, and he finally got there. He absolutely deserved it. Stunning lap on the mediums in Q2, and it's just all hope as much as possible that he can keep it there tomorrow.
Yeah. I think that's what as well is making it so good that it was on the mediums that he went through, despite setting a lap on the softs.
Obviously, he went quick on the mediums.
Absolutely, and Ricardo behind, Ocon behind on softs. Obviously, Alonso, he beat the Ferraris on mediums, but Ricardo and Alonso were on softs. Obviously, Alonso had the thing, but Ricardo and Ocon say were on softs, and he beat them both. And then he went and beat Stroll in Q3.
Yeah. So Sean is very obviously giving it to George Russell. I too am giving it to George Russell for the reasons mentioned. Tom, who's your star of qualifying?
Oh God,
is it a hat trick?
It's not. No, I'm giving it to Lando Norris because to be 0.048 off of a Max Verstappen pole position in 2021, to be that close, to put it P2, to be the fastest Mercedes-powered team. Wow. Lando, young man, you have come a hell of a long way in a few years. George Russell comes very, very close. And if Lando would have been P3, I would have probably given it to Russell. But to go P2 and to be that close, just an outstanding lap from a very, very talented young man.
Yeah, absolutely. Lando Norris being my other option for star of qualifying. But,
and mine, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
Can you tell what, where we're all from?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's get some predictions for tomorrow. So let's start again with Sean. Who's going to be on the top step tomorrow? Is it going to be Max Verstappen again?
I think shy of a historical Honda blowout, there's no way Max doesn't blitz this one. He loves this track. This is essentially his home track until we actually get to his home track. He loves this place. They love him. It's Red Bull's home track, and this is the 10th Red Bull podium in the turbo hybrid era. And
Do you mean
Paul, sorry. And what? Yeah, Paul. Sorry. And there's no way in hell he doesn't blitz this. He'll win by a bigger margin than last week.
Yeah, Tom, your top step, please.
It's got to be Max Verstappen. I mean, I just echo everything Sean just said. Aside from a turn one sort of like melee, if you like, it's either going to be Verstappen walks away with it, or he's going to have, just imagine the scenes. He has an engine failure. Norris takes over P1. Oh, God, a man can dream.
All the orange.
Yes. Oh, my word. Oh, God, if that happens, you'll have to peel me off the ceiling. I'd be so happy. But yeah, no, Verstappen P1.
Verstappen P1. I think as well, I hate to do it as a Lewis Hamilton fan, but Max Verstappen without, as you say, a historic Honda engine blowout or something going wrong. I mean, we did see Max Verstappen drop massively back off the grid and still win back in 2019 at this circuit. There's nothing that's going to stop him other than something going wrong. So yeah. Yeah. So how about the rest of your podium then, Sean? P2, P3.
I hate to do this because, again, McLaren fan, I love Lando Norris, but they show in the race last week, he let the Mercedes and Perez by because there was just no point fighting them. They didn't have the pace, and they're on softer tires this week. I think they'll struggle a bit. I still think he'll be best of the rest easily, but I think Hamilton will jump Perez if he gets a good start, and it'll be Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez, 1, 2, 3 for me. As much as I don't want that to happen, I'd love to see it end as it starts. I'd love a really boring processional race to get that top three, Verstappen, Norris, Perez, but I don't think it'll do. I don't think the McLaren has the race pace, and unless Perez can do something magical off the line, I think Hamilton will probably jump him off the line.
Yeah, it's quite impossible, isn't it? So, Tom, the rest of your podium, please.
As much as it pains me to say it, I think Norris, much like he did last week, we'll see. This isn't the fight I need to have. It probably won't be worth that kind of risk. So I think he'll drop back, and then as the other two, he'll probably just almost let them go. I'm going to say I have faith. I'm going to say Verstappen P1, Perez P2, and then it's going to be a Merc-powered P3. I'm just going to go left field. I'm going to say Bottas, because I think he's going to go, right, Hamilton's got a seat. Here we are. Here's me. I am what I am. And then he's going to go and absolutely cane it to P3.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, I'd love to see it.
I'm just saying it because I'd like to see it. I don't think it'll happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to break the trend of having two Red Bulls on the podium and say that Hamilton's going to get P2. I think Sergio Perez might either be left out to dry by Red Bull in order to, combat Mercedes tactically, or something just won't quite line up for Sergio. But then I'm going to keep Lando sticking in P3 because, if the Red Bulls are fighting the Mercedes too much, you never know what might happen. And Lando is obviously very strong here. First podium last season, this time last year.
Yeah,
if he could do it on the anniversary of it,
and he did do it by catching Lewis.
Yeah,
on the last lap, but within 5 seconds.
Yeah. So that is the predictions. How about time for a bold prediction? So something that we know what a bold prediction is. Sean, your bold prediction, please.
My bold prediction is that Pierre Gasly will get on the podium.
Oh.
I don't know if that's too bold because he's been brilliant this season, but that AlphaTauri is nowhere near as quick as the cars ahead of it. So that's my bold prediction.
He has showed up on the podium this season.
He has,
At the same time, he's started P6 several times and not been on the podium for those. So, yeah, that's a bold prediction. Tom, yours, please.
God, I don't know. let me just pull up the qualifying results. Yeah. I'm going to go Fernando Alonso P5,
Ooh,
best of the rest.
jumping
I like
up
that.
a
That's
lot
a
of
good call.
positions.
Mm.
I mean, it's a
Well-
very Fernando Alonso thing to do. It's just as to whether he's got the car to do it. So, yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I'll definitely have his camera on for the whole race, watching him feel through, because he will.
Yes, sorry, I hate to interject. I think, well, no, sorry, ignore me. I was looking at the Styrian qualifying results, not the Austrian results, and I was about to say, oh my God, Vettel's got a penalty, but I was just like, no, I'm looking at the wrong results. I'm very sorry.
It's okay. It will happen either as soon as we stop. Or just before, when like I'm already rounding off. So, yeah.
I've been waiting for it to be announced. I have my notification set for Sky F1 and it hasn't come through yet.
If it happens before the show ends, Sean, you have to shout up now.
I will scream at the top of my lungs.
My bold prediction is going to be Mazepin for the... No, that's never going to... That's too bold.
Yeah, okay.
I think Valtteri Bottas out of the points.
Ooh.
You know, this is a very high altitude circuit, and Mercedes haven't really been on the ball recently. And if I have to keep the faith in Lewis Hamilton because of the fact that, I wouldn't even watch F1 if it wasn't for him. But, if anyone is going to drop the ball this weekend, I think of the two Mercedes drivers, it will be Valtteri Bottas, and he will fall out of the points. Maybe.
Wow, that is bold.
That is a very bold prediction.
He'll have a lot of, hungry drivers behind him trying to get into the points. The Ferraris, Ricciardo, Alonso. So
George Russell is in the points, and we know what happens when them two get on the track together.
Oh, let's not go there.
Oh God.
Yeah. Oh my word, yes.
George.
Yeah.
I named my cat George after George Russell.
Oh wow.
That is dedication to the cause.
Well, he's a little troublemaker, so we end up screaming George at him all the time, just like Alex Albon last year.
I was going to say, in a very Albon-esque manner, yeah.
That's where we came up with it. So myself, my girlfriend, and the cat will all be rooting for Russell tomorrow.
Come on, George, says George.
Yes.
Meow form.
Yeah.
So that is a show. So first of all, I need to give an opportunity to promo Everything F1. Tom, please take the reins. Why should people have a listen to Everything F1 podcast?
We are a friendly bunch, honestly, and we have good discussions around literally everything F1 is where the name stems from. So you can find Everything F1 on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Discord. You can follow our podcast, Everything F1, and then on Instagram, Twitter, I'm probably forgetting one. We are at Join EF1. Also, you can visit us at www.everythingf1.com.
Banging. Absolutely. Go and have a listen to Everything F1. It's very nice for them to loan us some presenters. It's almost a bit like Baku Outer Ring,
I was just gonna say we feel like George Russell going to Mercedes for a race.
And if anyone wants to find me on social media, I am at Rubes, RUUBEZ. I host the F1 Grid Talk podcast. So that's my promo, George. Okay, so Grid Talk is available on Amazon as well as YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, Omni Studio, and Pocket Casts. Just search F1 Grid Talk. We have a huge back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the qualifying and race results. We are on Reddit, search for the subreddit F1 Grid Talk, and we also have a Patreon for mics, lights, and better recording equipment. Also, make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back tomorrow to review the results from the Austrian Grand Prix. Thank you very much for listening. Sean, has there been an announcement?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not. I'll reload it, but I don't think so. No, not yet. He's still in 8th for now.
Vettel is still in 8th. But thank you very much.
He won't be in about a minute.
Probably.
Yeah,
thank you very much for joining me, Sean and Tom.
Thanks for having
us.
Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.